Each episode of Brain Health Unchaining Your Pain with Dr. Ruth Allen is for educational and demonstration purposes only. The information shared in each episode should not be interpreted as medical advice. This episode should not be used to self-diagnose or self-treat any health, medical, or physical condition. Do not use this episode to avoid going to your healthcare professional or to replace the advice they give you. Consult with a trusted healthcare professional before doing anything contained in this episode. If you have any questions or concerns, please contact www.ruthmaryallen.com/connect. Welcome to the show, Brain Health Unchaining Your Pain. I am really looking forward to this conversation today because it's such an important topic that we're going to talk about. And I'm joined by the wonderful Alison Shaloe. Welcome to the show, Alison.
Oh, thank you, Ruth. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, I'm so pleased we got to connect because I know that the last time we saw each other, which is actually the first time thanks to COVID, was at the London Havening Practice Group meeting. And it kind of feels like we've known each other for a really long time, but actually we never physically met in person until a couple of weeks ago. So it was so lovely to meet you.
Yeah, you too. It's great.
And for those that don't know Alison, so Alison is a qualified midwife and lactation consultant and also a Havening trainer by trade. She's an energy healer and baby whisperer and author of the book Baby Talk to Me, Spirit Baby Messages for the Journey to Motherhood. She supports women on their journeys to motherhood practically, mentally, emotionally and spiritually. And I absolutely love that you cover all of those 4 quadrants of health. And part of her mission is to heal the emotional wounds of the mother. And she uses various modalities to do this. She also facilitates women's empowerment groups, helping women to birth more of themselves. And I absolutely love that. And I'd love to dive into some of the things that you said there. But before we do that, what are you passionate about in life right now?
Oh, the thing I feel most passionate about right now is empowerment of women.
Oh.
I feel like, I don't know. I mean, I just love women. I work with women. I love women. And it's, in my work, I can see so much how as women, I mean, and men as well, how we've become so disempowered.
I totally agree.
Yeah. And I think I think now is the time where people are stirring. I think sort of since COVID, it's really made people look at their lives, look at perhaps what's happened before. Lots of people have chosen to, not return to work or return to working from home. I think there's been so many shifts that people are kind of waking from what seems like a bit of a slumber. And it's about bringing more of this, like the divine feminine, like the true who we are, because we've been so conditioned to stay small. We've been conditioned to stay quiet, to make other people feel comfortable. And actually, as a result, we've been quite suppressed. Yeah. So that's part of my mission really, is to help women to feel more empowered, to really discover who they truly are. And of course, that's come from my own journey of rediscovering who I am, because I was that wounded, suppressed person who stayed quiet to, make other people feel comfortable. I was certainly a people pleaser. And, the mantra in my family was, it's nice to be nice. And so that was what I always had to be, was to be nice. And that meant I couldn't not be nice. So I was nice to everybody, but to my own detriment, really.
And because I think sometimes we have to say no, don't we?
Absolutely. And it's about creating healthy boundaries as well.
Yeah.
That's the key thing, is about, those boundaries that we need to, for us to be okay and to become more and more of our authentic selves, really.
Yeah. So, and I think that point of empowerment is so important, because I think often when we try to be nice to others, we spend all of our time giving our energy out and none of our time reflecting on putting energy into ourselves at an emotional, physical, mental and spiritual level.
Yeah, and absolutely.
And then it kind of depletes us, doesn't it? Because we're constantly looking outwards and spending no time reflecting inwards.
No, absolutely. And I feel that's sort of part of my role now really is helping people to go inward a bit more, because
Yeah.
the world is a really busy place right now, and so sometimes we have to come back, learn where our own energy begins and ends, coming back into the heart space, I suppose, really is what I'm aiming to help people with.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's so important. And in the context of your life's journey, where did you start in? Where do you feel you started losing that power yourself personally? Could you take us back to
Yeah,
where it started
well,
to be diminished?
yeah, I think probably it was childhood.
Okay,
That took me right back to the beginning, where I often felt like I was being silenced.
okay,
Often, stop that silly laughing, stop that silly crying. Oh, she's always making a drama, she's always making a fuss. And so, obviously I felt uncomfortable as a child. And so I think over time I just learned that it was best to say nothing. My
so
family
you
might not
kind of had to
agree.
suppress your emotions that you really
Yeah, I
wanted
just
to express.
Yeah, and then you sort of pick up that, people are not comfortable about talking about emotions. But I mean, I have always been somebody who wears my heart on my sleeve and
Yeah,
share emotions. And I just couldn't understand why so many people didn't. And I
yeah.
realized that I did make people feel uncomfortable. And it wasn't intentional. But I think as a result, I suppressed myself really. Obviously
Wow.
unknowingly,
Yeah,
unconsciously.
yeah. And what effect did that have on you personally when you, because we kind of, like you said, we do this really unconsciously, but
Yeah.
there is something that goes on internally within our system
Yeah.
that says it's not okay. So what did you notice with this suppression of your emotions from childhood?
Well, I think a lot of the time I didn't feel very safe.
Okay.
And I would be kind of reading a room, was it okay to speak or was it not okay
Oh,
to speak? So it kind of held me
yeah,
back a lot. I felt like it held me back as a midwife. I mean, I'm not practicing as a midwife now,
yeah.
but I felt like it sometimes held me back. I felt like I should be more vocal about what was happening in the birthing arena. And I
Okay.
feel like that really stopped me. And I've done a lot of work now. It's only now I'm kind of coming out of the shell because it feels a bit safer, because it didn't really
Yeah.
ever feel safe.
Oh.
So I think that's what's happened basically.
No, and I think that's really important that you share that, because I think there's so many women out there who, Barbara Gustafson, who was on on my
Mm,
show a while ago, she talked about this. The importance of being quiet. And it's not just women; it's men as well. They have to be, silenced. They can't express themselves, and the
yeah,
knock-on impact that has in you showing up as your true self in the
yeah,
workplace.
yeah,
Your childhood experiences affect your personality in the workplace as well as in the home place,
yeah,
and it can
completely.
have a huge impact on you and your you don't feel being like, I don't know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but for me personally it felt like I wasn't being congruent with myself when I had to silence
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then I just reached a point, I thought, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not doing this anymore. No. Why am I staying silent to keep everybody else comfortable and I'm not feeling okay? And thankfully I realized, because a lot of the time it's when people end up with, quite a severe illness,
Yeah,
that's the kind of the waking up moment of like, I'm not
yeah,
doing this anymore. So thankfully I got to it before that point where I thought, I'm not doing this anymore. But
yeah,
I've had to overcome, I would say, quite a lot of fear, Ruth, to be able to, even to be on this today, to speak
yeah,
out. It's like overcoming so much fear, that fear of being shut down, that fear of being, well, maybe even persecuted almost, which is like, it's so irrational. But the
yeah.
fear when it's there is huge.
I think it's the fear of being judged, isn't it?
Yeah,
Because we judge ourselves so harshly sometimes,
yeah,
more harshly than the people in the room that you were trying to stand.
yeah, absolutely. And so busy, with this mantra, it's nice to be nice. Really, like, it was not okay to not be nice. And what if you upset somebody because you have to be nice?
Yeah,
Yes. So it
yeah,
kind of rings. I hear it all the time now. And now, of course, I realize it was just a conditioning in some ways, harmless. It wasn't, it was on the surface, you think, well, it's quite a good motto to have for life, isn't it? But actually, no, it's kind of really kind of held me back in some ways.
yeah, yeah. And also, you weren't being nice to yourself.
No, everybody else, but not me.
Yeah, that's for everyone but yourself.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious to know what inspired you to become a midwife. My mum was a midwife, and it wasn't the thing for her. I don't know what the reason was, but she ended up being much preferred to being at accident and emergency place. What was the inspiration for you?
Well, for as long as I can remember, even probably pre-14, I thought I want to be a midwife. Now, I'd spent many years playing with dolls. And
Okay.
I think I wanted to be a midwife because it meant I could be with the babies. But what
Ah,
I very quickly realised was this is not a job you do because you love babies. It's because you love women.
okay.
But that I didn't realise that when I started out. I was like, oh, I'm going to get to hold all those lovely babies. It's like, it's not about that. It's about being with women. It's about supporting the woman and empowering her through her journey.
Yeah. And you mentioned that, you felt like you were suppressed when you were a
Mm.
midwife and you couldn't express yourself fully and
Yeah.
speak up. What was the sort of when did the aha moment happen for you to say enough is enough, and that you could change, you had the power to talk out and be
Yeah.
yourself?
I mean, I think I was very lucky in that I trained at a time where it was still relatively, most women had vaginal births. There was
Yeah.
less intervention, there was less
Mhm.
cesareans, there was less inductions than there are now. And I was trained in a way that I knew physiology really well, knew the physiology really well. It becomes, relative. I mean, occasionally you get caught off guard, but mostly there are things that you see, you think, oh, this is maybe not going as well as we think it might go.
Mhm.
But generally, when you know physiology really well, it's like it jumps up at you. It's like, oh, we have to do something now. Your instincts are
Mhm.
strong, and you need to do something. So where I had worked originally, where I trained, it was very autonomous. I really felt like an autonomous practitioner. I really felt like I kind of not had the power, but the midwives had autonomy.
Okay.
And so when I moved to a different hospital in North London, and I couldn't believe the difference where it was, because even though that was the same time, it was much more medicalized. There was much more follow the policy, follow the policy, follow the policy. And because I had worked in this way that was much more autonomous, is what I can describe. We're making
Was it more
decisions.
patient centric though, or
Much more
client
patient centric. Yeah, they barely saw a doctor. There was this real trust in the midwives
Yeah.
that we were able to know when things were deviating, and then we would call the doctor. Whereas when I moved to this other place, it wasn't like that. That the doctor was there for every ward round, and then I was the midwife saying, we don't need a doctor in here for the ward round. If we need you, and of course it wasn't popular. It did not go down well, Ruth.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think it was probably there where this silencing started to happen, where I just thought, it's actually not safe to say, I don't agree with that policy, and I think this woman needs a bit more time.
Yeah.
And I suppose being in that environment, seeing that other people, it just seemed like it was the norm to suppress. But I became more and more uncomfortable. I thought, I actually don't think I can do midwifery like this, because it kind of went against the core of who I was and how I'd been trained, which was much more about autonomy. And it just didn't feel that I was being an autonomous practitioner. I was following a bunch of rules that sometimes I was thinking, why are we placing these time limits on women when what she needs is probably a bit of rest, or she needs a walk, or she needs something to eat.
Yeah.
So,
rather than looking at the person and their needs, they were focused on the rules of the process. It's not
exactly. So I came out of that when I had my children. It was kind of like an escape. I did do a little bit, but that's when it kind of led to the breastfeeding stuff. And then I worked as an independent midwife in 2014, and that was wonderful, because that was when I could really see I was back there to being that autonomous practitioner that was supporting women in a way where they felt empowered. They were making decisions, even if they were the decisions I wouldn't have chosen for them. I was able to empower them to make the decision and support them in whatever that decision was.
Yeah.
And that was wonderful.
Yeah. And I think that's so important for women, because I had a lovely midwife, and I'm sorry if she's watching, I can't remember her name. But she was really great throughout the whole experience. She made me feel like I was the one that could be in control of how I developed the baby inside me. And she was like my guide on the journey, all the way up to obviously giving birth. And it was quite difficult when I actually had to visit different midwives to get checked as to where is the baby sitting in the context of, are they ready to come out? And this is Lily now. Because you build a bond with your midwife, don't you? Because they become almost like your birthing partner.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it depends who's in the room. You know, the environment is such a crucial part of birthing. So if, you know, if the midwife rubs you up the wrong way, or you know there's a clash of personalities, it affects the birthing woman. It really can affect how she births, because you feel stressed. You may not be in fight or flight, but certainly like you're like, I'm not sure how I feel about this, and like you're not meant to be in your mind when you're birthing. You're meant to be in your body. You know, you've got to really connect. You've got to close off that logical left brain. Is it left brain logical? Left brain, doesn't it? Logical.
Which way round your brain is, but yeah, your logical part of your brain.
But the logical part is the bit that you need to shut down, really, and when you're birthing. And of course, when there's this disruption to that, asking women lots of questions, like, this is not the time, you know, unless it's absolutely urgent. But generally, you know, just allowing women to. So the environment is massive, and that change of staffing can be so disruptive to some women's labours that they almost take a bit more time to settle back into it again. The environment's, you know, it's such an important part of it.
And then can you sort of explain to me what, you know, if you're willing and able to share, when everything is going right for a woman, how you help them connect with themselves and empower themselves to bring a beautiful new baby into the world?
Yeah. Well, I think about a lot of it is about being connected. I mean, there's part of us that wants to kind of disappear out of the experience, but actually being in the experience. I mean, Ina May Gaskin, she wrote a book called Spiritual Midwifery, and she's got this lovely quote, which is that women in labour are an elemental force. It's like, don't mess with her, you know, let her do her thing. Really, the idea is to really just support and just hold the space. Just hold the space and help her to feel safe. It's about feeling safe and, you know, just telling her how amazing she is, and as many ways as you can to try and increase the amount of oxytocin in the room. Basically, in short.
I can relate to that. I know my birthing experience was absolutely not what I had on my birthing plan. And it was like the Bush Tucker trial of medical intervention, and we went everything from pessary all the way through to be giving the drip and C-section at the end. But the thing that got me through was setting up the right environment in the room as well as in my mind. To get through all of the trauma. One of the biggest things for me that I did was it was Christmas time, and I had a playlist of 260 different Christmas songs that I would listen to, and I think we got through them twice as part of the experience, with candles and, you know, things playing. So I think it is so important to create that right space.
No, absolutely. And you know, it's challenging. You know, women are giving birth in a medicalized system. It's really hard to say no. They make it very difficult for women to say no to things. And it always saddens me, women having stuff on their birth plan and then coming out thinking, I didn't have any of those things. And I think that is kind of the bigger picture, is that disempowerment of women. Because when you truly know what you want, you're like, no, I'm not having that. But because we've got this sense of, oh, I better please them, you know, they're doctors, they know best, so, you know, I better do what they say. I mean, obviously that's not consciously what women are thinking, but so that's part of my role now, is to help women to feel really empowered and like know your power. Do you know how powerful you are? Because we've lost that ability to know just how powerful we are as women.
And I certainly felt like, I do feel still now, that I would have loved to have given birth naturally and had that powerful experience, which was not possible because I was 14 days late, and they said 12 days late, and they said that I had to have a C-section, and that was incredibly traumatic for the baby, Lily, but it was also unbeknowingly traumatic for me, which I didn't realise, and my havening journey kind of evolved as me uncovering the trauma that I had buried beneath me.
Yeah.
I'd love to know how your havening journey started in the context of midwifery, and how you've used that to empower women now on their
Sure.
birthing journey.
Yeah. So I think I must have been looking for a healing technique, because I thought, oh, women are really having a difficult time. Obviously, I've worked as a lactation consultant for over 20 years, and I
Yeah.
always ask women, I give them the opportunity. They don't have to tell me if they don't want to, but I always give
Yeah.
them the opportunity to talk about their birth.
Yeah.
And and so that gives them a moment to debrief. And of course, I was finding more and more when I was seeing women that they were just having really, really challenging birth experiences, saddening,
Yeah.
like not what they had planned at all. And that
Yes.
feeling so disempowered. And so I feel like maybe I'd sort of been thinking, gosh, I really need a way to be able to help women to heal, because this, sending them off to therapy for, months and months and months. I just thought I would love to have something that, just lifts it for them, because they're, and it's one thing having feeling traumatized by something, but having to look after a new baby at the same time is like who can do that? It's like, it's so hard.
It's so hard.
It's one thing looking after yourself, but looking after another human, you've got to keep it
Yes.
alive. It's really tough.
Yeah, I agree.
So then I stumbled across a little workshop that somebody else that you've, Louise
Carmi,
you've been interviewed her before, and she was just doing the thing at a local centre. So it was 2 hours in the evening, and so I thought, oh, I'll go along and see. And I have to say, Ruth, what I witnessed, honestly, it totally blew me away with what Louise did. Now, Louise is very skilled anyway, but she'd obviously got a lot of experience. But I could just see, oh my goodness me, I need to learn how to do this technique, because if you can take out the emotional content of a trauma in 15 minutes, oh my gosh, what a difference this is going to make to the women that I support. And the men, because they're traumatized from the birth as well, often, they're holding the space with no idea how to manage any of this.
And they totally haven't got any control over it.
Totally. So I went up to Louise at the end and I just said, oh gosh, Louise, I have to learn how to do that. She said, well, she said, I'm doing a training in 2 days' time. I was like, oh gosh, 2 days' time. Anyway, I juggled the kids around. I made sure that I was available, and I went on the training, which was in London. And I have to say, it was a bit of baptism of fire, because Louise made it look so easy when she did the demonstration. And then, when I was there on the day, thinking, this isn't as easy as it looks, just touching someone from the shoulders down to the arms and across the hands and face.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, all right, lovely. So you went to this session with Louise Carmi, and there was an introduction, and then you joined the training with Louise, and like you said, is not as easy, is it?
No, it looks easy, just stroking the arms and face and everything, but there's so much more to it than that. And that, I know you've discussed it here on the show as well before. But so initially, I really feel like I messed it up on the first go, Ruth. I just thought, it's not worked for this woman. I don't understand how, I did what I was supposed to do. I don't know. But basically, I went into this whole, oh, you see, you think you're something, don't this ego voice going, oh, so you really think you're something, don't you? And actually, you're not so clever, are you? And aren't you stupid? And blah, blah, blah. And all this terrible, terrible negative talk about you can't even distract somebody and stroke their arms. You messed that up as well. I mean, obviously, I know now that, there was 2 of us at it, and, it's like, it wasn't just me, of course. But I have to tell you, Ruth, I went into, well, it was basically fight or flight. I was absolutely hysterical. I had to leave the room. I had to be havened, because I was just totally convinced that something so simple I couldn't even do. How was that so difficult? In fact, as I'm talking about it, I can sort of feel the emotions from it, even though I've done loads of havening on it. And so I thought, well, I'm not going to be very good at this. And I said to Louise, I actually don't think this is for me. And I think maybe I shouldn't come back tomorrow. And she said, no, please come back tomorrow. There's so much more to it. But by then I was really shaky, rocky, not feeling confident at all. And so I went back the next day. And then one of the women that was there sat beside me, and I was feeling really vulnerable, thinking, I made such a fool of myself yesterday. I can't actually believe I've come back here. Anyway, so she sat beside me and she said, I've deliberately sat next to you, she said, because I want you to heal my birth trauma. I've had a baby 2.5 years ago, and I'm not over the trauma of the birth that we had with him. And I looked at her and I was like, did you see the state of me yesterday? Why would you possibly want me to help you heal your birth trauma? And she said, I want you to heal the birth trauma, she said, because you're a midwife and I trust you. And I thought, oh my God, she trusts me, but I don't trust myself. Anyway, so I thought, I don't know how the hell this is going to go. And because I'd really lost my confidence the day before, I said to Louise, can you just oversee this? Because if she's asking me to heal birth trauma, and I was doing a simple thing yesterday, and how I reacted. Anyway, so we did the healing, and the woman, she had what do we call it? She was very triggered by the experience.
Yeah.
But by the end, when we went back into the circle, we had to share how people had got on with the experience. She said, I'd just like to share, she said, is that I had a birth trauma, she said, but now it feels like it's so far in the distance that it didn't even happen to me. And that's when I thought, oh my God, the power of this. Because I knew it the first time I saw it, there was power in it. But then I had that day where I was just all over the place, like, oh, do you think it's easy? My ego was really kicking in.
Yeah.
And so it was a struggle for me, if you like, it took me a while to complete the case studies for it, because I still had that, this is too good to be true. And who do you think you are? You're not even a therapist. Who do you think you are, being able to heal people's birth trauma when they spend months and months in therapy? So I had a lot of so much of that imposter syndrome, like, how dare you? Who do you think you are? This voice would just go on and on and on. So I had to use havening on myself a lot, Ruth, to overcome that ego, that voice that kept on going, you're just rubbish. Who do you think you are? All the terrible things that we can tell ourselves.
And I think it's so important that we do have those tools like havening to help ourselves overcome the negative self-talk that we have inside our mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think, learning about havening and the psychological impact of trauma, often we think it is purely we can talk it out, which is what traditional talk therapy is, but actually that doesn't address the outflows, not necessarily address the emotional outflows, certainly not the somatosensory components of the trauma, and also not the autonomic ones that we often experience. And I think it's really important that we find the right tool for us, and havening I think is fantastic, but there are many other tools out there that empowers us to heal ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So that really set me off on a journey after all of that, with the healing the birth trauma, and then finding havening and that understanding. I'm thinking, gosh, no wonder women get traumatized in birth. If there are these 4 conditions for traumatization, which is an event, which is a big event, you're giving birth to a baby, it's a huge event, it's a huge life event. And then you've got the meaning. So the meaning is that, if you're being told, we need to do this because something might happen to the baby, or if we don't do this, something might happen to you, that meaning is, I could lose something here. And in this case, I could lose my life, or my baby could lose its life. That's terribly scary. Or both. Exactly. And then the landscape, so that's the landscape of the brain. So that's kind of like neurochemically, how stressed you've been, or how stressed your brain has been. And if you've had a stressful few hours before that, or generally you've had a stressful life, or you've had difficult life experiences, it's going to change the neurochemical landscape of your brain. And then you've got inescapability, and with inescapability you can't move. You've got everything, you've got all the straps on, you've got a blood pressure cuff, you've got monitoring the baby, you can't move. So you just think, oh my God, you've got all 4 right there. All of those conditions are right there. And of course, some women get traumatized and some women don't get traumatized. And that's often about the emotional resiliency and the neurochemistry of the brain. So women often blame themselves for what happened, but so much of it is just about our brains trying to protect us. Oh, this is very familiar to something I might have experienced in the past. I don't like that. And then, of course, all of those stress hormones start to to kick off, and then women go into that fight or flight, but of course they can't run away.
No.
And then that experience kind of gets frozen in the system, and then as I see it, it starts to come out more in the postnatal period, and particularly with breastfeeding.
Yeah, and I'd love to know what you notice on if there is a correlation between people having problems with breastfeeding to their traumatic birthing experience. Have you noticed a correlation between the two?
I certainly have. I mean, what we find is that women who've ended up with medicalised births, or sometimes with this emergency cesarean, even elective cesareans, that they are more likely. The evidence, the research shows that it definitely can impact on breastfeeding compared to when you have a natural birth, where it's all your own hormones. Your body adapts more easily, whereas if you've had lots of medication or lots of fluids, it can just delay the milk coming in. Sometimes, often women can be a bit stressed, and that has a huge impact on milk coming in. And I've certainly seen that seems to be the case. Many of the women that I support with breastfeeding do feel traumatized after birth.
Yeah, I know for me, I mean, obviously my outcome was emergency cesarean, but I remember spending a lot of time trying to get the colostrum milk.
Yeah.
Is it colostrum? I got the
Yeah,
right
that's it. Yeah, that's the first milk.
Yeah, out before I gave birth to help me with starting breastfeeding, and my goodness, I was so pleased I did, because of the trauma afterwards and the difficulty in getting yourself started.
Yeah, no, definitely. Particularly when you're feeling like that, where what you really want to do is just curl up and go to bed, but it's like it's not possible. There's a child to feed here as well. So it's really
and you've had major surgery.
No, absolutely. So any women that I work with antenatally, I always get them to start expressing colostrum. And that's partly that the women who express colostrum, and this isn't always the case, that they seem to, because they're already familiar with their breast, they're familiar with how to get the milk out. Whereas when you're immediately post-birth and you've never done it, can feel like such a huge thing. So even though there's not much research on it, I certainly find that it helps the women that I get them into encourage to remove their colostrum first, to get them off to a better start. And also it means you've got some milk to give the baby if the baby's not latching, for example.
I found it brilliant from my husband's perspective, because he could feed Lily whilst I was trying to recover a little bit from the surgery. So we had quite a few syringes available to feed her, which allowed me to kind of heal.
Yeah, absolutely, and to take the stress off a bit, because the stress of feeling how you feel, and then you've got a baby to feed as well. It just means that you've got a little bit of bit of extra milk just for those first few days before the mature milk. I mean, there is colostrum there obviously, but it's when the mature milk comes in on the third day. But,
And in the terms of your journey from, obviously you started helping women with trauma from the birthing experience. What were the big surprises with havening that you uncovered as part of exploring the birthing trauma that women have through your work with havening?
Well, I think it was that realization about the conditions of how trauma happens was just like mind-blowing. Like, well, obviously these women can't get off the bed, then so that was one of the things. And then there's a part of havening where we use role havening.
Oh yeah.
And this is where you take on the role of the other person. Now I obviously I knew about it, but I felt a bit scared to do it, but somehow it fitted really well with the work that I do. And often women who've experienced birth trauma, they never get an apology. They haven't got time to write letters about how they feel about their birth experience. So often it doesn't reach the powers that be that could make those changes, because they're just so busy with babies, and they're trying to heal emotionally and physically. So what I found is taking on the role. I take the role on of the midwife or the doctor who perhaps they felt, said things that were inappropriate, or the way that it was said. So, because sometimes it can just be the way somebody says something. It's not what they're saying, it's the way in which it's said. And so often during that role havening, I found that I was giving them an apology, probably an apology they would never get. And that was the thing. And also saying, the midwife did the best she could with the knowledge, skills and experience she had at the time. And that seemed to be the main thing, the apology, and that them you know, once you've done some of the havening, so you've taken the sting out of it, if you like, once you've done the havening, and then coming in to kind of mop up any last bits. And that was when the role havening was really helpful. And then they got to have a voice. Well, what would you like to say now? If that midwife was sitting in front of you now, or that doctor or paediatrician or whoever, what would you like to say now? And they get the opportunity to say it. And because you're doing it under the influence of havening, where you're increasing the delta wave, it seems to kind of embed a bit more in the subconscious. And so they come out feeling like, I know what really happened, but I now feel like it's not part of me, or it's distant, or it's an image. And the other thing is to build a new image. And the sad thing about this is the new image that they build is often the one they write about in their birth plans.
Is it?
So they go back to, well, actually, I don't want to imagine myself giving birth in a bed. I'd like to be in the water pool, or actually this time I'd like to be imagining myself in open waters. And that's fine. They can be wherever they want to be. Most of them go back to being in the water. So whether that's in the sea, we've had it in rivers, some just in the birth pool. You know, they often are not they don't want to recreate the birth they had. They recreate something else that is much more beautiful. And so often when they come out of the experience, they get that sense of oxytocin. So that even though they know that's not really happened, we're not trying to change that. But obviously the brain is amazing, and you know, it doesn't know whether it's happening now, in the future, or so by doing this outcome havening, you just change the outcome that kind of sits better with them, that they feel more peaceful with it.
And how do you manage to catch them, help them with the trauma, as it were, shortly after their experience, to facilitate breastfeeding, or are most of your clients being, you know, quite a period of time after giving birth?
Well, I have a bit of both, but the majority of women, and that's what I loved about havening. So women aren't generally coming to me because, oh, I've heard you're a therapist and I need some help with birth trauma. They come to me because they've got a breastfeeding issue. Then we start the story, and then they start to weep. And then I very quickly say, I have this tool. I'll tell you more about it in a moment, because they're already activated. Are you okay to touch me? If not, are you okay for your husband? Or do you mind just putting your hands together? They do it themselves. And then I just take them through that process and just reminding them that they're safe, and we do the distractions, and then we go back in. And in so many times, Ruth, I've been with women where it just feels like the milk is not flowing. We do the healing of the birth trauma, and suddenly the milk starts to gush out.
Does it really?
And it's powerful. It's powerful. You know, that trauma, you know, we're holding it in our bodies.
Yeah, we do. And I absolutely understand that we do.
Yeah. So I've seen that on numerous occasions, you know, and then just women just looking so much lighter than when I arrived. Because they're not carrying the heaviness of what happened to them.
And isn't that a beautiful thing, that, you know, how many people could be helped, so how many women can be helped, how many men can be helped in that whole birthing experience and the trauma that comes with it, if we included this as part of you know, what midwives are trained to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it needs something different, because we're not therapists. Midwives don't want to be therapists. But we need some way of being able to support women that is not, because they haven't got time. They've got new babies. They haven't got time to be.
They haven't got time to do 20, 30 sessions of talking about stuff they don't want to talk about.
No, and that's the thing. They don't want to talk about it. And that's the beauty of havening. I don't even need to know what happened at your birth. All we need is how it made you feel, and we'll just work with that. And you get such powerful results. It's incredible. I feel like it's such a gift. It's such a gift, and it's transformed my work, really. I would say totally transformed.
I'd love to know, in the context of your journey, and we haven't asked this question yet, what does optimal brain health mean for you personally, given everything that you've just said?
Oh, optimal brain health. Well, I feel like it's very important. You know, I feel like for so long, we've separated the mind and the body, and they're deeply connected. And you know, what's not okay in our mind starts to show itself in the body. So I think, and of course, the beauty of havening is that you are bringing mind and body together, which I just love, because it's all stored.
Yeah, and I think we use our body to help heal our mind
Absolutely.
because we're using the power of human touch.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so many people are, they're starved of touch.
Yeah,
Touch is our first language. That's what babies expect.
exactly,
And we are very much starved of touch. So yeah, it's about caring for our minds and our bodies.
Yeah, I think that's so important, and I'd love to dive into the mind aspect of the care piece that you just mentioned, and the spiritual content of our mind that we so often forget. And I know your journey took you on a bit of a path that was completely unexpected.
Yeah. So I mean, it does all come back to havening, and I think what happened with havening is I had to overcome a lot of fear, a lot of doubt about myself, and I did a lot of that through personal healing and affirmations with havening. And there were some biggies that were there that needed to be cleared, and I got some help for the big T's that kind of underlying in the surface. Underlying, and so I did get some help for that, but mainly I was using havening to support myself, and now I feel like, and this is not, I'm really not coming from a place of ego, Ruth. I really feel like there's nothing like in my mind I think, oh my gosh, I need to heal that. I feel like I've done a lot of healing, and havening has been my tool, that there isn't a lot left. And I think what happened was havening opened me up to like another dimension, to the true authentic me. And I realized that I was not just a human being, that I was actually a spiritual being in a human body. And that has opened up a whole new world. I became very interested in Reiki, and that probably was the other thing that helped me. It was like it was an opening, but I was really sensing that my hands, even, it kind of came along the same time as havening, but then havening took off. But the Reiki opened me up in another way. And then with all the healing, it's just like, it's almost like reaching a point of self-actualization. And I really don't mean that in an ego way. It's like, yeah, it's such a lovely place to be. It's really scary to go to your wounds, but actually once you're through it, it is just amazing. Life can be so wonderful when you get through those difficulties, and then you just feel like you're in a place of just being. And like, I feel like I have no expectations of people. I live my life where I just feel a bit unattached, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's not that I haven't got people, but I'm not attached to things, and I've experienced quite a lot of loss in my life. So I wonder whether that's where that's come from. But the trigger probably was the loss of my mother as well. All of this happening at the same time. The loss of my mum, and then that was such a huge loss. And then I was like, gosh, I work with mothers all the time. So it was like, I really have to grieve this, because how am I going to work with mothers if I don't work through my own grief? And it has been really powerful. I think I've gone off track slightly, but
no, it's
that's
really
been
important.
Really powerful. And so it's I've reached a different place, and having never believed in any spirituality. I mean, I was raised a Catholic where they did talk about souls and spirits and angels and Divine Mother, and then I kind of went against all of it, and now found myself back almost like in a full circle.
And I'd love to know if you could talk about your journey to writing your book, Baby Talk to Me, but Spirit Baby Messages for the Journey to Motherhood, because I think this is a really fascinating topic that we don't give at all enough credence to, in the context of the spiritual connection we have with babies who don't make it into this world.
Absolutely. So I started writing a book about breastfeeding, Ruth, because I'd had nearly 25 years of experience of supporting breastfeeding women. And I had also, supported lots of them to heal from trauma, and was unpicking all of that, and how sometimes that trauma is related to other things that happen in life. So I sat down to write this book about breastfeeding, and I was going to talk about mind and body connection and all of this. And I would get into a bit of a meditative state, and I'd get my writing pad out, A4. And then before I knew it, there were like 7 or 8 A4 pages written, no mistakes. I thought, this is a bit weird. Anyway, when I read it back, Ruth, I thought, oh, this is not about breastfeeding. This is not about breastfeeding. What is this about? So I kept writing. I was very curious, and I kept writing. And what I realized now, Ruth, is that it was automatic writing that was what feels like came from a higher place. Because they weren't my words. yet they were important. And I thought this was all the things I'd been reading about. I thought this is all coming together. Anyway, before I knew it, I had 90,000 words.
Wow.
And I was really like, who are you and where did this come from? Now, I know this might sound very strange to some of your listeners, but I was told it was from the spirit baby realm, which is basically the babies before life and after life. Now,
Wow.
this is a very different concept, but actually it's what I've discovered more and more is it's actually not a new concept. It's a very ancient concept. It's just that we have forgotten. With the 5,000 years of patriarchy, we have forgotten some of this ancient wisdom. And there's a lot of ancient wisdom in that book. But I thought, I am writing a book which talks about spirits and souls, and I'm a midwife. Now, how can I possibly take a book out like that? So I had to do a lot of havening over the fear of bringing it out. I'm not really going to write it. I can't possibly do this. It's irresponsible. Imagine a midwife talking about spirituality. This is shameful. How could you possibly do that? Anyway, so then I thought, I can't take that book out. So then I thought, I'm going to just write about some of my experiences as a midwife. So I put that in the book as well. And then I thought, no, I still can't take it out. I just can't. People won't believe me. That people will think I'm crazy. I'm going to lose my reputation. I'm going to be struck off the nursing and midwifery register. I can't. It's just too irresponsible to do such a thing. And then I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to see if there are any references anywhere for any of the stuff that I've put in my book. And so then I went on another little trail, and I have got over 400 references.
Wow.
So that book is basically bringing spirit and science together. And what I realize now, of course, is that is what we have lost in birthing. We have lost the spiritual aspect of birthing. We're made up of all four elements, but we're also made up of the mind, body, spirit, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. We're made up of all of those.
Yes, we are.
And part of me wonders, are we in the state we're in the world? Because there's a huge part of us that's been cut off. We've already cut body and mind, and spirituality is even further cut off. And I'm not talking about religion.
No, I agree with you. And I want to go from that cut off piece is because, we separate ourselves from the baby when the umbilical cord is cut. And that is our physical and also our spiritual connection separated from the baby. But we still have a spiritual bond with our baby when they're born. And we all absolutely have a spiritual bond with our baby when they're growing inside of us, because they're a part of us. And they continue to be a part of us when we're growing up. And I'm sure there's hundreds and hundreds of parents out there, and I had a very strong spiritual connection with my dad because he used to look after me when my mum was really sick in hospital. When I was a baby, she nearly died, and my dad became like my mum. And he actually knew when I was home from school, when I came home as a surprise home from university, I came home as a surprise, and my mum said, "You never guess who's in the house." He said, "I already know, Ruth's here." I knew when I walked over the bridge into the village. And I think we really have lost that spiritual connection to each other, and particularly to our children, but also to the wider world. We've kind of in the last 100 years grown up to say, like, we are more important than nature, and therefore we don't need to care about it. But actually we are 100% dependent on nature, and we are made, we come from nature.
Absolutely.
And I think it's so important. So I'd love if you could talk a little bit about your book and what it talks about, and how it is been a revelation to you in terms of helping women connect with the spirit babies.
So obviously the book was doing its thing, and I didn't really, well, as in before it was published, and I was dealing with all these fears and everything. And then even the week before, I thought, I just can't, there's just no way I can publish this book. I just can't. How irresponsible. Anyway, I've done it. It's out there. It's been out there for 10 months. She's making her way in the world. It's fabulous. And basically that book is to support women on their journeys through fertility, after loss, and also during pregnancy. So what's really interesting is lots of grandmothers have bought it, and I think it is to support their daughters that will be coming up. So I feel like it's a book probably for the future, and it feels, because some of it is like a bit out there, and it was a bit futuristic, if you like, but anyway, I feel like it's coming, and I can see it now, and something else has dropped in. I'll tell you about that in a second. So basically what I do now is I support women on their fertility journeys. Now,
Yeah.
I didn't realize I had this ability, Ruth, but I think because I opened up to all of it, I have the ability to connect with babies even before they're conceived, during pregnancy, in utero. And that was partly how this work started, and then also after loss. Now, the way that this started was when I was in my breastfeeding groups and I felt that the babies were talking to me. Now, obviously, they weren't speaking, but I suppose I was picking up telepathically what that baby needed. And so I didn't tell the women because I was terrified that no one would ever come back to my group again. Yeah, I was a skeptic too. And I knew that women could be skeptics too. And then it started happening when I was working with women when they were labouring. And I would hear the baby say things like, she needs to move her left leg so that I can get out. She needs to go to the bathroom. We need to transfer to hospital. Now, of course, I was totally freaked out. But I learned to just trust it and thought, this must be happening for a reason. I'm getting this for a reason. It's because I'm a midwife. And the work that I do, it's got to be. So, I mean, honestly, it's been a journey. But I've now started to trust it more and more, and I can see that the difference it makes for women. And it really, the work I do now is about, bringing hope to people. It gives them the higher purpose, maybe why there's a delay and why they're not getting pregnant. Maybe the bigger reason why the miscarriage happened or why a baby chose not to stay. And so often women get caught in the sadness of it all, and very often it's often the baby's choosing, and that might be a new concept to some people, and it's not to dismiss people's experiences either, but it can bring a lot of hope to families, and that's certainly what I've been seeing in my work. And it's meant that I recognize that the work I do is very sacred work, and it is about bringing more spirituality, more sacredness, because I'm not talking about religion when I talk about spirituality. It's about bringing more sacredness to everything that we do. It's exactly what you said. We've forgotten that it's Mother Earth that provides for us. It's the mother that provides.
And I think it's so important. I just want to share with you like the sacredness of the spirit babies is I had a very traumatic miscarriage, and I was only 7 weeks, maybe a little bit longer in. And it really took me by surprise when I had the miscarriage. And it wasn't really until I went on the havening journey that I truly understood that it was a message. And I really learned a lot from it too. Because if I hadn't had the miscarriage and I hadn't been through the really deep low that I went through when I had the miscarriage, I wouldn't have appreciated for myself personally the importance of me setting up the right environment for my baby to grow. And I was in an incredibly toxic workplace culture, and I was not optimal at all by any stretch of the imagination in the context of my own health. And I had to do the deep work to get myself to a place where my body was ready to grow a baby, and the environment was right. And we talk about landscape in our mind is so important, and that reflects the landscape that we create in our womb as well, and certainly for me personally anyway.
No, absolutely. And we know, and the evidence is there, and I've written about that in my book as well. And it's a book of all sorts, really, dolly mixtures of anything birth related, but it's but talking about the impact of babies in utero experiences and how that impacts their life. There's so much evidence around that now, and it's so important that we're creating that. And sometimes we think we're ready, but we're not quite ready.
I was so not ready. I honestly didn't even think about. I just thought that you just made a baby. It was so naive.
But that's what most women, that's what most parents, people that are planning to have babies, that's what they think. But it's not that. It's so much more. And so, we store so much of what happened to us as children, what happened to us as young women and young men. All of it is stored. And then, of course, I can speak for myself here, and there were times where, I was parenting my children from a wounded place, where I didn't give to myself. And what I recognized was that I had unmet needs as a child, and it was playing out in my parenting. My children are very forgiving. And we've talked a lot about it, about how I was wounded. And sometimes I would get really cross, but it wasn't really anything they were doing. It was my own unmet needs that were playing out. Trauma plays out in our parenting. And so if we can help parents to really understand this idea about the environment that the babies are growing, how it impacts their lives, we can make such a difference right from the very beginning when we recognize, because awareness is the first step to healing. Just having that awareness, I was treated like this as a child and I don't want to repeat those patterns, or I want to change it, or I want to do it differently. It's so powerful. And that's how we're going to make the changes for the generations. And so I'll just go back to the book very slightly. Some of the messages in the book are about, we don't want to come into the trauma that so many of you have suffered. We want this to be easy. So what that means, of course, is that we as their parents have to do that healing before they come.
And do you know, I think that's such an important message, because we really have in the past sort of 100 years, maybe less, medicalized the process of having a baby, and it's so much more than the process.
And when you think when you think it's only been the last 100 to 200 years that we've been medicalizing birth, before that people did, they managed to birth babies
very successfully. For most part.
So I think the baby's concern is, that, I mean, one of the lines in the book is, we're on the verge of mass extinction. Things have to change, and we are that generation to start that ball rolling. I think our ancestors were unable to. They were often living in fight, flight, freeze. They didn't have the space to go to therapy. They were surviving. And now we are fortunate, whether you agree or not, that we can do that for ourselves in a way that our families couldn't. And of course, our families, despite what happens, they do the best they can with the knowledge, skills, and experience that they have at the time. No one sets out to hurt people.
And I think that generational trauma is really important, because we're now in a period of peace. Contextually, from a world perspective, but actually we are carrying generations of trauma, like we all do.
Absolutely.
Particularly over, we all do, from hundreds of years ago all the way through to the present day, and that can be expressed in our behaviors, and we might not even understand why, but actually it's past generations that are expressed into our present world.
Absolutely.
And we need to be given the right tools to know that we can heal ourselves.
Definitely. And it feels, and I still didn't really understand why I'd written my book. It was a bit out there, I was a bit worried about judgment, which has actually been okay. Anything that's been negative, it's like, I get it. I didn't know what spirit babies were. I get it. I totally get where you're coming from. I get it. And now, just in the last few weeks, I have learned a new modality, which is about healing the ancestral wounds. And part of that healing is to clear, disease patterns and programs for the generations to come. And so when I saw the modality, a bit like when I saw havening, I just know that it's going to have such an impact on the generations coming forward, which is very, very exciting.
I think that's really exciting. Alison, it's been an absolutely fascinating conversation with you. What would your advice be to any woman that's really struggling with the birthing trauma that they've had, or they're worried that their child has got birthing trauma?
If you're worried about your baby having birthing trauma, one of the simple things you can do is to be skin to skin, maybe have a co-bathing, get in the bath, have a rebirthing in the bath, bring your baby chest to chest, skin to skin if you can. And if it was challenging, to just stroke your baby and just acknowledge for your baby, that was really difficult. That was difficult for you. That was difficult for me, but we're safe now and I love you. And although we didn't plan for any of that to happen, just know that we have got each other and, we love each other. I feel that more, I'm seeing it in my practice. I'm getting people to do that, and it's really making shifts. But also, if you're feeling like you're really stuck in the depths of it, then often it is helpful to reach out for extra support, so you're not doing it alone. We're not very good at asking for help generally.
No, we're not, because we've been conditioned as we started with to keep quiet.
I'm strong. Carry on. I'm strong. I can do everything myself, and it's like, no, we're all connected. No, we have to reach out for help.
I love that. And how can people reach out for help for yourself, Alison? How can people get hold of you, learn about what you do, get hold of your book, Baby Talk to Me, Spirit Baby Messages for the Journey to Motherhood?
So my website is Alison Shaloe, and that's SHALOE.com. My Instagram is Alison Shaloe _. If you want to know more about spirit babies, then you can go to Instagram, Spirit Baby Communication, if you wish.
We'll put that in the show notes, that link.
And I do have a podcast which is called Birthing the New Humanity. I just started about 6-7 episodes in, and there I'm really bringing in kind of ancient wisdom and knowledge to really try and empower women to take back their power for birthing and bringing babies into the world.
Wow, that sounds fascinating. So do make sure you check out Alison's website, all the links, join her on Instagram, and her Spirit Babies on Instagram. I can't remember what the link is, but I'll definitely put it in the show notes. Alison, it's been an absolutely fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your journey and talking about how you can really empower women to step into the person they want to be and help them heal from their own birthing trauma.
Yes, thank you. There's hope for all of us. Thank you so much, Ruth, for this opportunity.
Oh, you're most welcome. Remember, everyone, this show is all about brain health, unchaining your pain. You're not stuck with the brain you have. All the trauma you have the power to heal yourself, and Alison has kindly been here to show you how. Thank you, Alison. I really hope you enjoyed that conversation. Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to like and share this episode and leave a review on my website or on Apple Podcasts. If you're looking for opportunities to optimize your brain health or unchain your pain from a past trauma, make sure you visit my website www.ruthmaryallen.com and use the code podcast10 at checkout to get 10% off all programs. And always remember, you are not stuck with the brain you have. You have the power to make it better. You have the power to unchain your pain and optimize your brain power and performance so that you can win back energy and time doing what you love.